Thank you for joining me in this last segment of the show. Talking again, wrapping this show up with Deion Sanders. I closed out yesterday's episode talking about Deion, and now I bring him up again because there is a lot of talk around the draft now. Obviously, we're getting closer and closer, and with the draft, there is a lot of good things. Players obviously get drafted, fulfill their dreams, all that good stuff, but there is a lot of negative, unheard of, untalked about things that really just happen and teams don't bring it up. People don't bring it up as to why this just randomly happens. What I'm referring to is sometimes you see players have high draft grades, a lot of positive around them, and then you hear a story, a potential rumor, some hearsay around them about their life off the field, having some issues off the field, and it all paints them in a negative way, and then their draft stock just drops, and a lot of people are left wondering, oh, why are they sliding so much? Why did they suddenly drop? It could be because some of these rumors come out that hurt not only their draft stock, but if they're severe enough, it could hurt them just personal-wise. Then people are commenting on their character, what they're like off the field, and they're questioning all of that, and it gets all a bit too personal at times when everything seemed to be going good. Something comes out and it all just crumbles in just a minute, and they're thrown into a loop. A lot of uncertainty comes with it, and it's pretty nerve-wracking, honestly, just to think about being in this position as a draft prospect. You're about to realize your dream, and then something like this happens. It's a very bad situation to be in, but it happens, and Deion, of all people, Deion Sanders, backs up these actions that take place, and he talked about it yesterday. Deion came forward with more to say on Travis Hunter and his son Shedeur Sanders in regards to them and where they're going to fall in the draft. He mentioned the specific teams that I talked about yesterday, but last week in an interview with Front Office Sports, he explained his reasonings for being so selective and being so outspoken with this, with generational type of players that he believes that he has and has coached. He said that I played in the league for 14 years, and I was on television with NFL Network and CBS for another 20 years. Therefore, I kind of know which teams there are in the NFL that are not serious about winning, and why would you want your players or your children even to go to places that are not set on winning? Saying that, it makes sense. You hear that, you have to remember Deion, not only, like he mentioned, is a coach. The way you see these videos play out with his coaches and him talking to them and stuff like that, he seems very close to them. He seems like he wants truly the best in them. So taking that into account, hearing him talk, plus he is a dad, he is coaching his son. He wants them naturally to go into the best situation, and him having this experience in the NFL, all these connections in the NFL still, I'm sure hearing what goes on with the draft, working on the draft as well, I'm sure he knows for sure better than most people how the draft works out and how these teams set their draft boards, how they raise people's stocks, and how also they deteriorate people's stocks as well. And it makes sense. He wants the best for their players, so he is trying to be selective. It rubs people the wrong way, but that's just how he feels about it. And not only that, he went on to say that teams usually dictate where players fall through good methods and through bad methods. Good methods you see, as an example, just this year, Jim Harbaugh coached J.J. McCarthy. Now he's going into the NFL. Talks glowingly about J.J. McCarthy, and that on top of the pro day and a lot of what J.J. McCarthy has shown just raise his draft stock. But what Jim Harbaugh has said about him, that can't be lost in all of this process. That has certainly helped sway how certain people view J.J. McCarthy. If Jim Harbaugh is saying he's great, one of the best quarterbacks he's seen in college, there has to be some truth to that because he is Jim Harbaugh. He has to know what he's talking about, right? And in that, with generational talents like Eli himself, Deion Sanders, John Elway, Travis Hunter, Shedeur Sanders, he believes that what they're doing, being outspoken and deciding where they want to go, is just doing the same thing that these NFL teams are doing essentially in controlling where a lot of these players go with some of the news that comes out. In the quote in Front Office Sports, he referenced a lot of this, and he broke it down in the way he sees it by saying, you have guys that are slated to go and slotted to go at this number pick. Randomly, something comes out that they flunked a drug test, or they have this type of injury, or they were seen with this, and wildly, their draft just drops later in the round or even into the next round. And in saying that, he continues on. How does that happen? How does that mysteriously come out right before the draft? So isn't that the same thing? That's even more harsh. Then obviously referencing them, it's even more harsh than them just simply saying they don't want to be drafted here or here. Hurting these draft player stocks is even more harsh in his mind and his way of saying it. Then the conversation continues, and it usually, or not usually, it just concludes with, so that's done every year. The reason I know that is because I've worked the draft, I think, for about 10 to 12 years straight. I know that to be true. NFL teams releasing rumors, starting rumors, releasing personal news. He claims it to be true. He's played in the NFL for decades, and he claims that to be true. So taking all of that, how do you analyze that? What do you think about that? NFL teams doing that, and now Deion Sanders as a counter with generational type of players, just going back at it, essentially doing the same thing and saying, no, I want to be drafted here, because at the end of the day, with these players, and I want to make sure I say it's the generational type of players. I've talked about this before, how college is sort of shifting into this method now, this mold of players coming in off of NIL and being more outspoken, having more responsibility, so them taking charge more. I want to make sure it is just limited, at least for now, for these generational type of players, because most of these players are more likely to benefit from pulling an Eli Manning. These generational type of players, if they're good enough, they're going to get drafted, right? These general managers, these teams are going to draft them, even if they come with baggage, if they come with saying they don't want to be drafted here or there, or they want this or that. Generational players, rare players, unique, special players usually just get drafted. So saying things like this, pulling an Eli, wouldn't hurt them compared to everybody else. If everyone just starts doing it, a lot of players are going to be undrafted, and they're going to hurt their own draft stock. So for now, it is just the special type of players that are able to do this, and they're usually the ones to benefit more from doing this, because it usually turns out in them ending up in the place they want to go. And with that being said, the rumors of Deion Sanders referencing can be seen as worse for a kid saying that he doesn't want to go to a certain team because they're questioning their personal side, and that's really where the issue lies. A lot of these rumors, stories that break right before the draft usually concern players and their personal side of things. Just as examples, looking back on the years, Laramie Tunsil, probably the most famous one. I shouldn't think it's that funny because it was pretty serious in the moment, but Laramie Tunsil, I'm sure everyone's seen it, the video of him smoking with the mask and everything like that, right before he was about to be picked, and then that just drops randomly. It is released out there, and then he falls. He proceeds to fall in the draft. And then, as another example, you look at Dak Prescott. He was arrested for a DUI, and then it was determined that all of the charges were dropped and that he wasn't found guilty really for that. But it comes out, you hear DUI, Dak Prescott, quarterback, people are going to think a certain thing about him, so he's going to drop. He was drafted in the 4th round when he could have potentially been drafted earlier. You hear something like this come out right before the draft, and it ultimately just ends up hurting them on the personal side of things. Then teams have questions, and they're not sure they're ready to risk it all on this potential red flag that they see pop up out of nowhere, blindsides them, so then they have to look a different direction. Even if it's true or not, it does end up hurting the players, And teams deserve to know that sort of thing. I know that. But dropping it suddenly leading up to the draft or on draft day right before they're going to get drafted, that's where the issue lies. And I'm sure Deion would probably say the same thing. It's really mostly about the timing. I'm sure teams definitely deserve to know these sort of things because they are investing a lot in these players. If they're good, they're going to invest a lot of money in these players, so they have to know everything. If there's a potential danger, something that could get them in trouble, if there's a habit, a behavior that they're not a fan of, they should know that to get a good feeling of what this player's like. That all makes sense, but dropping it so suddenly, that's where the issue lies. And maybe with a lot of these personal stories and reports that come out, maybe it was already discussed between teams and this player if he had a bad incident, a lapse of judgment once in his career that caused him to do a bad thing, take a bad decision somewhere. Maybe that was already discussed between the player and the team privately, but by releasing it again suddenly, now everybody knows and everybody starts making assumptions, and it gets just to be too overwhelming for the player, for the teams, to have everybody just ask them about the situation now, and it takes away from the kind of player that they are, the on-the-field thing, which ultimately matters the most with drafting a player, but it could be discussed privately, so that's another thing I think a lot of people don't consider. This could have already been arranged with the player and the team, but with everybody having an opinion, putting it out there for everyone to see, people are going to say negative things, and that carries on into a worse situation. And overall, with this whole situation with Deion, yeah, it happens, and you don't want it to happen, but it's not really acknowledged too much around the NFL that, oh, this happened because of this. No team is going to come out and say, oh, we didn't draft him because he had a DUI once or he was seen with this person once. That's why we're not drafting them. It's going to look bad, but it still happens, and that's where Deion really just wraps this all up with, in a way, saying if they're allowed to do this sort of thing, be this harsh, potentially harming to these players, at least the rare, very special players should have the ability to say, all right, well, this is my career, this is my livelihood, I want to succeed as much as I can in the league. They should be able to decide what teams fit them best. Of course, you don't want to go overblown and think, oh, I don't want to be drafted first overall to one of these worse off teams. I want to go in the late 20s to one of the top teams and have all the success. It's not going to happen. That's never going to be the situation. That's unrealistic. But Deion, I'm sure, with everything that he said, I'm sure feels that it is fair for these special players to determine where they want to go in the range of where they're projected to go anyway. I'm sure it's not going to go much more than that, but that is an interesting take from Deion. I never really thought of it that way, but once I saw his comments and decided what he sort of meant by it, I'm not going to advocate for everybody doing it. I think it's very rare for players, even any player, to do it. If any player is going to do it, it's going to be those Caleb Williams, the Peyton Mannings, the maybe Travis Hunter, Shedeur Sanders, those type of players that can do it, at least for now. I can see why they would want to do it, but that's where it stands right now. That's all until next year's draft. He's saying Travis and Shedeur are going to do that. We're going to have to see. Luckily, none of that stuff is happening in this year's draft with Caleb, just because he is going to the Bears. Everybody knows it, but it is definitely an interesting debate to have if it's fair for players to do this because teams do it. Is there a drop-off in where people fall off on which side is right or wrong? I think it's an interesting topic to come and talk about, discuss. If you guys have an opinion on it, who's in the right, do you agree with Deion or not? Leave it in the comments below at the conclusion of this video. I would love to know what you guys think on that topic because I truly thought it was pretty interesting and fascinating how Deion broke it down. But in saying that, in wrapping that all up, that'll do it for me on today's episode of the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. I want to say a huge thank you to you guys for tuning in and listening to today's episode. Make sure to like, follow, and subscribe to the show as well, on top of following us on all the social media platforms like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok for more of the network's content. If you want to see more of me and this show, check out the GSMC Sports Network channel and the Podcast Network channel on YouTube for YouTube shorts that are posted on there. Full recorded live shows like this one are all logged and recorded on both of those channels, as well as individual segment videos. If you don't want to watch a whole show, or if you missed a certain segment, want to go back and catch up on it, they're all on there on both channels. Make sure to tune in every weekday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time for more NFL and football conversations with me, Manny Maradiaga, as your host. Thanking you guys again for joining me, and I will see you guys all back here tomorrow.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet. Damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go.